Hey there. Welcome back to another peaceful evening together. Tonight's story begins by the soft ripples of Lake Edith, where the air still smells faintly of pine and citronella candles. Where laughter used to echo off the water, music floated like mist under the glow of dock lights. A place where nights arrived slowly, and the stars didn't rush to show up. They waited until the last note played, until the last foot left the dance floor, until silence kissed the shoreline. We'll sit with Lillian, now in her 70s, wrapped in a soft blanket and memories that feel warmer than the evening air. Her home is quiet now, but her heart is full of voices from another time, girls in sundresses twirling barefoot, boys with rolled sleeves and shy grins, and a wooden dock that creaked like it knew it was holding something precious. It was the year 1972, a summer of dusty roads and laughter that didn't worry about tomorrow. Lillian was 17, with wind in her hair and a curiosity that shimmered just beneath her skin. The lake was the center of their little world, and once a year, the community would string up lights, drag out speakers, and invite everyone to the lake dance. There was music, always music. Songs that melted into the rhythm of the night. Songs that made you bold, or soft, or maybe just still. Songs that seemed to know your secrets. And James with the boat builder hands and the softest voice she had ever heard. He wasn't loud or flashy, but he noticed things, like when her braid was falling out, or when she was pretending not to cry during a sad verse of a song. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. There was a moment, just before the music ended, when they stood under the docklight. The air had gone still. The world had softened. You could hear the water brushing against the boats. You could hear your own heartbeat. She thought he might kiss her. She thought the song might never end. But it did. And he didn't. And in a way, that made it even more perfect. Because the moment didn't shatter. It didn't close. It just stayed. Like the last page of a book you never wanted to finish. The years passed. So much has changed. But that moment was not the kiss, but the almost stayed with her. Gentle, unfolding. Like the last notes of a song, you never want to stop humming. This story isn't about regret. It's about how some memories live so quietly in us, they become part of our breath. How they don't demand attention, but offer comfort in the quiet hours. How they hum, just beneath everything, steady and sweet. Before we begin, if these stories bring you comfort, feel free to like this video and subscribe. In the comments, tell me, is there a song, a scent, or a place that takes you back? Now, settle in. Let the stillness of the lake calm your breath. Let the air around you thicken with moonlight and old music. Let your eyes grow heavy, not from exhaustion, but from the peace of knowing you're not alone in your memories. And let's drift gently into a story not about the moment that happened, but the one that almost did. It started with the sound of laughter skipping over the water like stones. The kind of laughter that only summer knows is light, unfiltered, and free. Lake Edith shimmered that evening. The sun had just dipped below the trees, leaving behind streaks of peach and rose in the sky. The air was warm, with just enough breeze to keep the mosquitoes away and the lanterns flickering. Lillian stood with her friends near the edge of the lake, barefoot in the grass, her sandals slung by 2 fingers. Her dress was a soft blue that fluttered when she moved. It wasn't new, but it was hers, and that made it feel like magic. Her best friend Jenny had helped her press it with warm towels earlier that afternoon. "Tonight's the night," Jenny whispered as she handed her a flower clip. "You can feel it." The dance had always been the highlight of summer. It wasn't fancy. A couple of locals rolled out plywood onto the sand, strung white lights from tree to tree, and connected an old stereo system to a generator that groaned every time the bass kicked in. But it didn't matter. Somehow, it felt perfect. Always had. She remembered the music first, how it filled the air and mixed with the scent of lake water and fried donuts from the food stand. Couples swayed. Children ran circles around picnic tables. Parents leaned against car bumpers, sipping lemonade from paper cups, pretending not to watch their teenagers. There were paper lanterns in pink and yellow, swaying from fishing wire. A cooler full of orange soda. Boys are showing off near the water's edge, skipping stones or tossing frisbees. Girls swaying in loose groups, arms looped through one another's. That night, everything felt alive. The dock had a special glow, not because of anything extraordinary, but because that's where people stood when they wanted to slow down. It faced west, just far enough from the crowd that you could hear the music, but also hear the lake, the crickets, and your own thoughts. It was under that dock light that so many things had started, or almost started. James arrived an hour into the evening. He wasn't flashy. He didn't announce himself. He just appeared, as if the night had been waiting for him. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, and there was a faint smudge of oil on his forearm, probably from helping his dad tune up the boat engine earlier. His hair was still damp. He looked like the lake itself had asked for a boy, and the summer delivered him. Lillian noticed him before she meant to. Her eyes caught on the way he looked around, not searching, but observing, like someone who didn't need to speak to belong. He wasn't the type to chase a crowd, but he made his way toward the dance floor eventually, offering nods to the few people he knew. He passed her once, close enough for her to smell the lake on his skin. He looked at her, just briefly, but it was enough. She turned back to her friends, pretending to be interested in the conversation. But her heart was beating a little louder, and suddenly, the music wasn't background noise anymore. A song came on slow, with a rhythm that asked people to step a little closer. Couples moved together naturally. Hands met waists, shoulders leaned in. Someone whooped from near the food stand, and the lights above the plywood floor twinkled like stars that had decided to come a little closer to Earth. James stood at the edge of the dance, watching, waiting. She felt her feet move before her mind caught up. She walked across the grass, slow and steady, her heart thudding softly like a drum roll. And then, they were standing there, together. Neither said a word at first. He smiled that small, patient smile of his, and offered a hand. She took it. The music wrapped around them like a blanket. Soft, unassuming, safe. They began to move. Slowly, carefully, like the world was made of glass, and they were learning to hold it. He smelled like cedar and lake wind. His hand was warm, calloused, steady. She felt 1,000 things she didn't have words for. Her heart wasn't racing anymore. It was just open. They didn't talk much as they danced. He said she looked different tonight in a good way. She said he didn't look like he'd come to dance. He smiled and said, "I wasn't going to. Then I saw you." It wasn't smooth, but it was sincere. They swayed through 2 songs, maybe 3. At some point, The world narrowed. The lights, the people, the food, they all blurred. Only the music remained, and the space between them, shrinking. She felt his thumb brush the edge of her hand, and the breeze changed. Just a little. The next song began with a soft guitar. Not loud, not rushed. Just enough to quiet the air and draw people closer. It was a ballad. One of those songs that played at every dance, but never lost its weight. A melody that seemed to settle into your chest and hum there. Lillian didn't know the name. She only remembered how it made her want to breathe slower, to stay still, to notice. James didn't say anything. He just shifted his hand to the small of her back, gently and respectfully, and they kept swaying. All around them, the noise softened. Voices quieted, laughter turned into hums and whispers. Even the lake seemed to hush, as if the night itself had paused to watch. Lillian felt the dock light behind her, casting a long shadow that danced with them. The light wasn't bright, it never had been, but it glowed like memory does. Warm, steady, a little blurred at the edges. James leaned closer, just enough that she could hear his breath when he exhaled. It smelled faintly of root beer. She smiled. He asked if she liked the song. She nodded. "It feels like the end of something," she whispered. He tilted his head. "Or the start." She didn't reply. Didn't need to. Their feet didn't follow the steps. They just moved in time with each other. Her head tilted forward, resting near his shoulder. His hand stayed still, protective, present. People moved around them, but Lillian didn't notice. The plywood floor creaked softly under weight, under memory. The strings of lights buzzed in the trees. Someone spilled punch near the lemonade table. A group of younger kids ran shrieking toward the lake. But she and James kept dancing, not talking, just being. She thought about the way the summer had gone. The days filled with swimming and sunburns. Her job folding napkins at the diner. The moments she passed James on his bike, always with a wave. The times she hoped he might stop and talk. He never did. Until now. And now he was here. Not as someone bold or boastful, but as someone steady. Someone who looked at you and didn't look through you. The song kept playing. Verse, chorus, bridge. He stepped slightly closer, and she let him. Not all the way, just enough to know she could. Enough to know she wanted to. Her breath caught not because of nerves, but because of the softness of it all. The permission to feel something without naming it. The freedom to live inside a moment that didn't ask for anything but presence. This wasn't about falling in love. It was about remembering what it felt like to be fully seen. She asked what he did that summer, not because she didn't know, but because she wanted to hear him tell it. He said he was building a dock with his dad. It's slow going. I think we spend more time watching the water than hammering anything. She laughed. That doesn't sound like a bad way to spend your time. He shrugged. Not really. You see a lot if you're quiet long enough. She looked at him. What do you see now? He didn't answer right away. Then, you. Just you. She wanted to say something clever, or poetic, or soft. But her mouth stayed quiet, because sometimes silence says more. The song kept playing. It should have ended by now, but it didn't. It stretched not in time, but in feeling. like a sigh that takes longer than expected, like the moon lingering just a little longer above the water. James looked toward the dock light. "Do you want to step away?" She hesitated, not because she didn't want to, but because she already knew what the moment might become. Not dramatic, not sweeping, just quiet and close. "Yes," she said, and they walked side by side toward the edge of the dance floor, toward the lake, toward the light. The dock light was just a bulb in a rusted metal frame, mounted to a crooked post that leaned slightly toward the water, as if listening. But in that moment, it felt like a stage light, a lantern above a sacred place. James and Lillian stepped onto the dock without speaking. Their footsteps echoed soft wood on softer wood as they moved past the edge of the dance. The music still played behind them, but it sounded far away now, muffled by distance and dusk. They stopped just short of the end. The lake stretched out in front of them like a mirror, catching the first stars in its stillness. The sky had faded into a deep blue, and the pine trees around the lake stood tall and quiet like guardians of something precious. James leaned against the railing, looking out at the water. Lillian stood beside him, arms wrapped lightly around herself, though she wasn't cold. She didn't say anything at first. Neither did he. It was the kind of silence that doesn't press, the kind that waits, patiently, kindly, the kind that feels like a held breath, not tense, but tender. "You come here often?" he asked eventually, with a half smile. She nodded. "Every summer, since I was little." He tapped his knuckle gently on the wood rail. "This dock's been holding a lot of stories, I bet." "Too many to count." James turned slightly, his arm brushing hers. Not on purpose, not entirely by accident either. The dock light flickered once, then held steady. The moths danced in and out of the glow, and the night deepened. "I thought about asking you to dance last year," he said. She looked at him. "Why didn't you?" He shrugged, looked down. "Didn't think you'd say yes." She smiled. "I would've..." He met her eyes then, and something passed between them. Not heat, exactly, but warmth, the kind that lingers in your chest long after a fire's gone out. Lillian looked back out at the lake. The music behind them had shifted to something even slower now, almost a lullaby. Someone had turned down the volume, or maybe the night had simply turned up its own song. The creak of water, the rustle of trees, the breath between two people standing just close enough to touch. "I think this is the last song," she said softly. James didn't answer. She turned toward him, her face lit by the dock light in gold and shadow. He looked at her, and for a moment, they both leaned in just slightly, almost like they were being pulled by the same soft thread. Almost, but not quite. The moment held, and then passed. He looked down, she looked away, and just like that, the space between them returned. Not colder, not heavier, just there. They didn't explain, didn't apologize, because there was nothing to explain, nothing wrong, just a moment whole and fleeting. She smiled, but it was a quiet smile, the kind that knows what could have been and still finds peace in what was. The music ended, and the light stayed on. For a moment longer, they stood there, side by side, saying nothing, letting the quiet fill the space with something that wasn't sadness or disappointment, just understanding. James leaned on the railing again. Sometimes I think the best parts of life are the ones that don't quite finish. Lillian tilted her head. Like the last line of a song you can't remember? He chuckled. Exactly. They didn't kiss. They didn't make promises. But she would always remember the way his shoulder brushed hers. The way the air felt heavy with things unsaid, but not needed. The way her heart felt full, even as the moment slipped away. Later, they walked back slowly, their steps unhurried, their hands brushing once or twice, but never fully meeting. That night, when she lay in bed listening to the frogs by the window and the soft click of her fan, she thought of the dock light, how it had shone down like a blessing, not to change anything, not to make something happen, but simply to mark the moment. And she smiled, even then, because the memory was hers, and it was enough. The years moved forward, the way years always do, not in leaps, but in small, soft steps you barely notice, until one day, everything looks different. Lillian didn't stay in the lake town. After graduation, she packed her bags, kissed her mother's cheek, and boarded a bus to the city for college. The windows rattled. The air smelled of dust and engine oil. She didn't look back, not because she didn't love the place, but because she wanted to remember it exactly as it was. The city was loud, sharp-edged, and exhilarating. The buildings loomed like giants, the streets buzzed, and the nights were rarely quiet. She studied literature and worked part-time shelving books at a small, quiet library that smelled of old pages and floor polish. It was there she met Michael. He was gentle, with ink-stained fingers, and a curious mind that turned even ordinary moments into conversations worth having. He asked her for coffee by the poetry section. She said yes. 2 years later, they were married. Their first apartment had thin walls and a leaking faucet that never stopped dripping, but they filled it with laughter and secondhand furniture and midnight pancakes on the kitchen floor. When their daughter was born, Lillian wept not from pain, but from awe. Later came a son, then a house, then school pickups, piano recitals, Sunday pancakes, and family camping trips that ended with everyone too dirty to care. Life grew thick with details. Birthday candles, lost teeth, dented minivans, garden weeds and spaghetti sauce on the ceiling. There were fights too over bills, over tiredness, over nothing. But the love stayed steady, like a current underneath it all. And through it all, quietly, respectfully, James stayed. Not in person. She never saw him again after that summer. But in memory, he came and went. Not to haunt, just to visit. Sometimes, it was during songs on the radio, the kind with soft guitar and long endings. Sometimes, it was the smell of cedar, or a boat gliding across a lake while she watched from a distance. Sometimes, it was nothing more than the flicker of a warm bulb in a quiet room. He never interrupted. He never competed. He was just there, a gentle echo, a soft glow. And she never told Michael about James. Not because she was hiding something, but because there was nothing to confess. The memory wasn't a threat. It was just a story she kept, folded carefully like a letter you never send, but never throw away. Years blurred into seasons. Her children grew tall, found their own loves, their own cities, their own rhythms. The house grew quieter. Michael slowed down. The sharpness in his eyes dulled just a little. The laughter came less quickly. but he always found her hand in the dark. Until one winter, when even that quiet gesture stopped. Lillian buried him on a clear morning, under a tree that smelled of rain and dry leaves. She wore the blue dress, now faded, and a little too loose, because he always said it made her look like spring. And then, she learned to live with the stillness. She read more, cooked less, took walks every morning, talked to neighbors, wrote letters she didn't send, Saturday by the windows longer than she needed to. And every May, always May, she would take out an old cassette player, one of the bulky ones from the 80s, and listen to that song, the slow one from the dance, the one that made her breath pause, the one that never had a name but always found her. She never cried. She just listened, because it was never about what didn't happen. It was about what had. She hadn't been back in decades. Lake Edith still showed up in her dreams, sometimes in full color, sometimes in fragments, flashes of a dock, the sound of music drifting through trees, James's soft smile beneath a string of lanterns. But real life had kept her away. Too many miles, too many responsibilities, too many years. Until now. Lillian arrived in late spring. The drive was quiet, lined with trees and wildflowers she didn't recognize anymore. Some streets she remembered had new names. The high school had a new roof. The old video rental place was now a coffee shop with paper lanterns in the windows. But the bones of the town, they were still there. The gas station still had hand-painted signs. The diner still advertised root beer floats. Main Street looked like it had been dusted gently, not remade. She stayed in a little bed and breakfast, 2 blocks from the lake. The woman who owned it, Marlene, was sweet and quiet. She gave her extra pillows without asking, and offered warm blueberry muffins each morning, served in a basket with gingham cloth. On the second night, Marlene asked if she was in town for the alumni picnic. Lillian smiled and said, "Just visiting an old friend." On the third day, Lillian walked to the lake. It was just as she remembered, and not at all. The trees were taller, their trunks wider. The wild grasses had shifted. The dock had been repaired. The railing was sturdier, but still creaked when you leaned. The lake shimmered, unchanged by time. A few teenagers sat on the rocks, headphones in, oblivious to the history beneath their feet. She passed the old boathouse, smaller now than in memory, and the stretch of sand where dances used to be held. There were no lights strung anymore, no plywood dance floor, no lemonade stand. But if you listened hard enough, you could still hear the music. Lillian stood at the edge of the dock for a long while. She didn't rush. She didn't speak. She simply let herself arrive, not just physically, but wholly. The dock light was gone, or maybe replaced. The old post had been taken down, probably due to weather or time, or some local maintenance plan, but she could still feel it. The warmth of that night, the rhythm of that final song, the almost kiss that had shaped something quiet inside her for half a century. She walked to the end and sat down, her feet dangling over the edge, shoes off. The water lapped gently below, the same soft song it always sang. In her pocket, she carried something small, a folded piece of notebook paper, yellowed and worn. On it, lyrics she had written down years ago when the song found her again. They weren't perfect. She didn't know the whole thing, but the chorus was there, scratched in pen. It still made her chest ache, not with sadness, but with memory. She read it silently, then refolded it and slid it gently between the dock planks. Not as a goodbye, just as a thank you. The sun was beginning to set, and the light on the lake turned golden. For a moment, Lillian closed her eyes. She imagined the laughter, the swaying bodies, the soft notes of a guitar drifting through summer air. She saw James not older, not changed, but exactly as he was that night. She saw his hands, his smile, the way he didn't kiss her. And she smiled, because what they shared wasn't less because it was brief. It wasn't incomplete because it didn't last. Some things are beautiful because they never had to become anything more. And so she sat, listening to the hush of water and the whisper of breeze through the reeds. The past wasn't knocking. It wasn't asking for anything. It was just sitting with her, kind, gentle, whole. Now, in her 70s, Lillian doesn't chase the past. She doesn't need to. Some memories don't fade because they never burned too brightly to begin with. They simply glow, quietly like dock lights that never truly go out. They stay with you in gentle ways, tucked into the corners of your thoughts, surfacing in quiet rooms and in quiet moments. She keeps a box under her bed with mementos from her life. Photographs of birthdays and snowstorms, letters from friends long gone, a pressed daisy from her wedding bouquet, a child's drawing of a family with misspelled names, a tiny carved duck her son made in 3rd grade, and tucked at the bottom, carefully wrapped in a handkerchief, is a cassette tape with no label. The song. She plays it once a year, not to feel young again, not to relive a single moment, but to remember that once, for just a minute, the world paused, and she stood beneath the docklight with someone who saw her, someone who didn't demand anything, who asked for nothing, who simply looked and didn't look away. It wasn't love. Not in the traditional sense. There were no declarations, no future plans, no heartbreaks. But it was real. And sometimes, that kind of quiet connection leaves the deepest print. Not everything needs a second chapter. Some stories live in the pause between lines, in the last note of a slow song, in the heartbeat before a kiss that never came, in the echo of a look across a dock at the edge of summer. And those stories, if you let them stay with you, not loudly, not daily, but like soft music playing in the next room, always there, always kind. We all have one, a memory that lives in a look, in a song, in a place we haven't been in years but never really left. And it's okay that it never became more. Sometimes, the almost is the most beautiful part. It reminds us that we can be moved, changed, softened not only by what we had, but by what we felt was possible. So if you're listening tonight, with a memory of your own one that never needed a perfect ending to be real, know this: you're not alone. We all carry one. And sometimes, it's the story we don't tell that holds us the most. The story we keep in the softest place in our heart. The one that asks for nothing except to be remembered. Now, in her 70s, Lillian doesn't chase the past. She doesn't need to. Some memories don't fade because they never burned too brightly to begin with. They simply glow, quietly like dock lights that never truly go out. They stay with you in gentle ways, tucked into the corners of your thoughts, surfacing in quiet rooms and in quiet moments. She keeps a box under her bed with mementos from her life. photographs of birthdays and snowstorms, letters from friends long gone, a pressed daisy from her wedding bouquet, a child's drawing of a family with misspelled names, a tiny carved duck her son made in 3rd grade, and tucked at the bottom, carefully wrapped in a handkerchief, is a cassette tape with no label. The song. She plays it once a year, not to feel young again, not to relive a single moment, but to remember that once, for just a minute, the world paused, and she stood beneath the docklight with someone who saw her, someone who didn't demand anything, who asked for nothing, who simply looked and didn't look away. It wasn't love, not in the traditional sense. There were no declarations, no future plans, no heartbreaks, but it was real. And sometimes, that kind of quiet connection leaves the deepest print. Not everything needs a second chapter. Some stories live in the pause between lines, in the last note of a slow song, in the heartbeat before a kiss that never came, in the echo of a look across a dock at the edge of summer. And those stories, if you let them, stay with you. Not loudly, not daily, but like soft music playing in the next room. Always there, always kind. We all have one. A memory that lives in a look, in a song, in a place we haven't been in years but never really left. And it's okay that it never became more. Sometimes, the almost is the most beautiful part. It reminds us that we can be moved, changed, softened, not only by what we had, but by what we felt was possible. So, if you're listening tonight, with a memory of your own one, that never needed a perfect ending to be real, know this. You're not alone. We all carry one. And sometimes, it's the story we don't tell that holds us the most. The story we keep in the softest place in our heart. The one that asks for nothing, except to be remembered.